The third session of today is titled COP16, Policy and Actions in Building Business Cases for Biodiversity and Nature. Before we start our panel discussion, as a reminder, online participants are welcome to use the Q&A box if you have any questions for our speakers. For the audience in the room, please raise your hands and we'll pass you the mic. Now, please welcome our moderator of this session, Dr. Andy Cornish, founder and chief strategist, Cornerstone Strategies. Please also welcome our panelists on stage for the panel discussion. They are Ms. Susan Hu, Nature Action Agenda Lead, World Economic Forum; Mr. Simon Chan, Assistant Director, Conservation, Agriculture, Fisheries, and Conservation Department; Mr. Patrick Ho, Head of Sustainable Development, Swire Properties Limited; Ms. Sophia Zhu, Special Advisor, Development and Strategy, Kadoorie Farm and Botanic Garden. And lastly, we have Dr. David Gallacher, Executive Director, Environment, Hong Kong, AECOM. And Dr. Cornish, over to you, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Panel 3 session. And thank you for the introduction, and it was great to hear from the Director of ASCD to get some government perspective on that to kick this session off. So I first started working on biodiversity and conservation issues more than 25 years ago in Hong Kong. I'm not counting any more than that. It's starting to make me feel really old. However, I think during most of that period, business engagement in biodiversity was primarily limited to limiting the impacts of physical developments through EIAs, greening of supply chain, and also some corporate philanthropy. However, that is changing rapidly, and as has been mentioned before, biodiversity is really, I think, the latest hot topic in terms of sustainability. And that has really sort of been driven from global dialogues, and we'll have a chance to hear from Simon in a bit on that. Simon was attending the UN Biodiversity Convention meeting that happened just a few weeks ago. Working on biodiversity and nature isn't always straightforward, and neither is the business case. This is quite an emerging topic. So I hope that through today's panel session, we'll be able to provide some answers to questions that you may have. So let me introduce to you my fellow panelists, who I hope are going to be doing most of the talking. So first, Ms. Susan Hu, so she's the Nature Action Lead for the World Economic Forum. Mr. Simon Chan, who was the Assistant Director of Conservation for the Agriculture, Fisheries, Conservation Department. A warm welcome. Patrick Ho, Head of Sustainable Development at Swire Properties. Dr. David Gallacher, the Executive Director of Environment from Hong Kong and AECOM. And Ms. Sophia Zhu, who's a Special Advisor for Development and Strategy at Kadoorie Farm and Botanic Garden. So we've got a great mix of government, private sector, local NGOs, and international NGOs. So without further ado, Simon, you've been attending the recent COP. Can you sort of share some of your high-level experiences?
Thank you, Andy. Yes, I went to COP16 of the UN Biodiversity Conference in Cali, Colombia, as a part of China's delegations last month. It was clear to everyone joining COP16 that nature is getting more attention worldwide. You may be amazed to know that COP16 marked a significant milestone of global engagement, bringing together over 23,000 participants, including over 3,000 representatives from the business sector, and that's the largest COP ever held. And this meeting showed that more and more people realize how important biodiversity is for businesses to be sustainable. Let me talk about some of the takeaways from COPs that I have attended. One of the major outcomes of COP16 was the establishment of a permanent subsidiary body for indigenous people and local communities, or what we call IPLCs, and which gives indigenous voice a permanent role in negotiations and strengthen their role in decision-making related to biodiversity. Actually, many COP16 participants representing indigenous communities are inhabiting and earning a living from the most biodiverse areas in the world, providing rich resources for various business and industries. The IPLC are anticipated to have greater influence in negotiation on biodiversity. Corporations would need to pay more attention to their supply chains and consider their impacts to, as well as dependency on biodiversity and nature. And secondly, it's worth noting that governments introduced the Kali Fund at COP16 to equitably sharing benefits from digital sequence information, or DSI. The Kali Fund serves as a global fund for benefit sharing, aiming to support countries that provide biological materials with funds to protect and restore nature. Large companies and major entities profiting commercially from genetic resources of biodiversity, such as pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, animals and plants breeding, biotech, and other industries utilizing DSI should contribute a percentage of their profits or revenues linked to their use of genetic information to the Kali Fund. Academics, public research institutions, and other entities using DSI but not directly benefiting from it are exempted from this requirement. While the new benefit sharing mechanism for DSI and the focus on IPLC may pose challenges, they also present opportunities for promoting responsible innovations towards sustainable production and fair sharing of benefits from the use of genetic resources. This call for respecting habitats, communities sharing on them, and their traditional knowledge, all of which contribute to the stability and sustainability of the value chains for industries and businesses. It is important to consider involving local communities throughout the value chains of relevant businesses and advancing conservation in partnership with them. And perhaps resource mobilization is the most critical but challenging topic for protecting biodiversity under the COP's negotiation due to competing priorities, limited funding, and varying levels of commitments from different stakeholders. It involves securing the necessary financial, human, and technical resources to implement conservation and sustainable use measures. Although COP secured some $160 million in pledge for the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, this amount fell short of expectations. The meeting did not make significant progress on the $200 billion annual fund pledged for nature as indicated in Target 19 of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. A draft decision on resource mobilization, which included a provision to establish a dedicated global financial instrument for biodiversity under the COP's authority, was welcomed by developing countries, but opposed by developed countries. While negotiations were contentious, sources of hope were found outside the conference room in many side events. The engagement of the private sector on nature-related issues was evident through the participation of many companies and investors at COP16. 2 days of parallel sections on finance and business, and a lot of experience and case sharings from industry leaders in the side events. Business indeed plays a pivotal and unique role in protecting biodiversity, and their participation at COP16 demonstrates increasing understanding of their roles, indicating that it is now a high time for more actions from the business community to address biodiversity issues through their sustainability programs.
Thank you, Simon. Challenging negotiations as usual. And for those of you who haven't sort of picked up on this, the old global targets finished in 2020. It took 2 years of negotiations to actually come up with the 2030 targets, which means that there's only 8 years left to deliver on them, and they are extremely ambitious. The good news is that since they've been rolled out, there's all kinds of guidance and frameworks, best practice guidance has been sort of rolled out to help people work on these issues. Sophia, KFPG has had an involvement in a certification. Could you please share a bit more about that?
Hello, yes. So just last, at the COP16, a very significant certification has been launched, and that is called the Global Biodiversity Standards. It was endorsed by international organizations such as IUCN, but it was developed primarily by Botanic Gardens Conservation International. What it is a certification recognizing positive impact on biodiversity on any land-based project. So any land-based restoration project, as long as you have a before and after in terms of ecosystem and integrity and reference ecosystem, we could certify the progress in terms of the scoring system. So this is developed by Botanic Gardens Conservation International to counter the negative impact by previously over-incentivizing carbon capture, which resulted in monocultures and which also in turn damaged a lot of local ecosystems. So KFPG, we proudly announced that we will become one of the 3 certifying hubs in Asia. So there's one in India on their subcontinental ecosystems, one in Malaysia on very tropical forest systems. And the rest of Asia, KFPG is willing to provide services on certifying the progress. That's it.
Fantastic. Great to have a local expertise, and Hong Kong being the hub for that. Susan, can you share any sort of particular observations from World Economic Forum perspective on sort of the actions coming out of that relating to business?
Sure, thank you, Andy. Good afternoon, everyone. Actually, I wasn't at the COP, unfortunately, but the forum sent a delegation, the biggest delegation of the forum ever, to Cali this year. And as Simon just mentioned, it is the COP which attracted the most business participation this year, reflecting 2022, the earlier COP, the former COP, there was 1,000 business participants, which was already a record for that COP. So tripling the participation from business, really showing a trend of increasing business interests on this nature agenda. From the forum, we organized several side events as well as some dialogues between business and government. Among all the prioritized topics, we want to highlight that the forum have been driving the sector transition to nature positive agenda. This initiative has attracted much interest from different stakeholders, especially from the angle of how to embed the insight of sector transition into regional implementation of KMGBF, which can also be the next direction of the forum to explore and work together with all the participants here to drive the agenda further. Other than that, I want to highlight that biodiversity credits as one of the innovative financial instrument also draw a lot of attention from banks. Yeah. And I also want to highlight another landmark decision on having climate and biodiversity synergized, especially with the angle of ocean, climate, and nature nexus. Yeah, so that's why the forum also have a work stream on policy coherence to support the key environmental agendas working together and us paying collective effort in driving those forward. Yeah, I hope that's helpful, and can share more later if possible. Yeah, thank you.
Terrific, thank you. Things like biodiversity credits are a really significant source of financing for conservation, nature conservation in other parts of the world, but very new topic here. So there's, I'm sure there's going to be lots of interesting conversations around those in years to come. So let's talk about Hong Kong now. So as we heard earlier, the next biodiversity strategy and action plan for Hong Kong, so the city BSAP, should be due out next year, and there'll be public engagement around that. Patrick, what can you tell us about the sort of private sector's hopes for the next BSAP? What would you like to see out of that?
Thank you, Andy. I think this is a good question, and not sure how much time you were able to give me for the list, the wish list. Very fortunate, but I'm very happy, of course, to hear Mickey and also Simon to talk about the vision of the refreshed BSAP, and also I know they're working really hard to sort of review and the previous BSAP, and with a view to refresh the latest one with a lot of new ambitions. So maybe I should also talk about alongside these government efforts, the local conservation community has also come together to form the Hong Kong Biodiversity Expert Group, chaired by Christine Law, and actually leads this group to work to make recommendations for the government to consider in the upcoming BSAP. And actually BEC, within this working group, actually leads the Business for Biodiversity Focus Group to provide that business-related recommendations to the government in particular to consider in the BSAP. So this focus group have been seeing participation from 21 organizations representing business and financial sectors, and academia and ecologists, which I'm privileged to be one of them to be able to contribute in this working group. I think one of the key consensus getting collected from this working group is the importance of the involvement of the broader business communities in supporting the city-level biodiversity strategy and actions. As also, Mickey also talked about, BSAP will form part of the China's national plan. Therefore, the key principle should be fully aligned. And also in the China plan, there's already, placed very heavy focus specifically on the actions that will involve the companies and financial institutions to contribute to the national goals. And also from the global level, international, the GBF, also within the 23 targets, the target number 15 actually requires business and financial institutions to transform the business practices through, first of all, regularly monitor, assess, and disclose the dependencies and impacts on biodiversity, and secondly, to reduce the negative impact on biodiversity and move towards sustainable patterns of production and a circular economy. So with that, by involving business sector in the new BSAP, with specific targets, related to the business sector and financial institutions in the upcoming BSAP, it should be naturally be aligned very well with both the international level and also the China national plan. So on the specific wish list, which Mandy used the word wish list, allow me to share a few at the time, taken from the recommendations from the BEC Business for Biodiversity Focus Group, which would address business interests, hopefully, and also relevant to business that aspire to start to formulate the nature transition plan. We have a climate transition plan. Nature transition plan is probably the one that everyone should start to think about, climate nature transition, in order to contribute to the Hong Kong-China BSAP and the GBF target. So the first one will probably be related to corporate assessment and disclosure of the risks and opportunities related to biodiversity and nature. So globally, nature is now, in the business world, is widely recognized as strategic risk management issues for businesses and financial institutions. And I have to talk about the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosure, TNFD, since we launched in New York Stock Exchange back in 2023. Now we have over 500 global companies and financial institutions have already committed to report under the TNFD framework. So together, they represent over $6.5 trillion US dollars in market cap, among all these public listed companies over. And with the subsequent launch this year of the TNFD framework in Hong Kong in April, we work with TNFD. There are now 10 companies in Hong Kong that are also committed to pilot that framework in the corporate reporting by the financial year 2024 and 25, if not earlier. And this number, of course, is comparably low to other Asian countries like Japan. So in order to mainstream nature-related corporate disclosure, the government, I think, would be in the best position to drive the uptick of the TNFD framework among the business communities in Hong Kong. And also in the view of the whole, reporting regime, as we all know, the ISSB has actually embarked on its research project on biodiversity, ecosystem, and ecosystem services, so-called BEC project. So building upon the recommendations or TNFD recommendations in order to develop, the global baseline for reporting that we're going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. So the Hong Kong Stock Exchange may also, sort of closely monitor that development internationally and be prepared to reveal the Appendix C2 of the listing rules with consideration to strengthen that requirement on nature-related disclosures. So, of course, to support the nature-related corporate reporting, the government, of course, would also be good to strengthen the provision and promotion of existing guidance in the forms of practical tools, recommendations, and trainings to enable businesses and financial institutions to start to assess, report, and act on their nature-related risk, dependencies, opportunities, and dependencies. And secondly, if I can call on the financing side, I guess also Mickey talked about the Hong Kong Green Bond Framework has already acknowledged biodiversity and nature conservation as part of it. So to drive forward the biodiversity investment, I guess there are very useful, clear top-down policy signaling is useful to actually reflect the strategic importance of biodiversity to the economy and put in place measures such as regulatory frameworks, tax breaks, and some de-risking guarantees to encourage the private sector to invest more in nature. And also as part of Hong Kong whole climate change action plan, I guess there's also a place that nature could be more explicitly acknowledged as part of the whole Hong Kong climate action plan. So to mainstream nature considerations into Hong Kong's environmental regulatory landscape, to recognize the very strong linkage between climate change and biodiversity. So also to echo what Mickey has mentioned about the nature-based solutions. I guess it's important, protected by biodiversity critical for sustainability and resilience of Hong Kong businesses. So as we all rely on the ecosystem services provided by the nature. So NBS can actually enhance biodiversity and climate resilience as a natural protection solution for some of the sites that has climate vulnerable coastal communities and infrastructure. So the government would look forward to see government having more actions to include NBS and Hong Kong's climate adaptation strategy and prioritize it in the city planning level and infrastructure planning level. And so more sort of support and guidance may also be useful for the private sectors, like developers like us, to actually encourage the practice to be mainstream in our current climate risk adaptation plan. So maybe we should stop here. Thanks.
Terrific. Thank you, Patrick. That was a very rich sharing. So Simon, perhaps if I can come back to you. So we heard already that the government views the involvement in business as being even more important in this next BSAP. Can you perhaps talk a bit more specifically about that? About how you see the role of business?
Yes, in terms of Hong Kong's BSAP, and in
Exactly.
Hong Kong's context.
Exactly.
Yes, I think as mentioned by the keynote speaker, the Director of Agriculture, Fisheries and Conservation, we are now updating our BSAP, targeting completion by 2025. And the second phase will focus on 4 strategic areas on conservation, capacity building, mainstreaming, and partnering. And I will talk more about some of the business-related directions of the updated BSAP, and hopefully it will meet some of the wish lists from Patrick. Target 14 of the Kwame Montreal GBF calls for the full integration of biodiversity into decision-making at all levels of governments and sectors in a whole of government and whole of society approach. We have already mentioned that in the first phase of the BCEP, significant progress was made through the collective efforts of the society. As evidenced by, for example, revitalized drainage channels and water bodies using eco-friendly design, the use of native species in urban greening, and the formulation of a blueprint to promote sustainable fisheries and agriculture. Actually, many partners have joined hands with us in taking forward the BCEP. The Hong Kong Green Building Council, for instance, has launched the BEAM plus New Buildings manual, offering architects direction and inspirations to implement designs and practices that enhance biodiversity in building projects. Indeed, business are closely connected to nature and its biodiversity. You may know that more than half of the world's GDP rely on nature and its services, from important natural resources to essential functions like pollination and climate regulations. To turn nature-related risks into opportunities for growth, business should understand how they affect nature and rely on it in their operations. Business played a key role in protecting biodiversity and can make good things happen by including nature in their sustainability strategies. Effective biodiversity solutions need everyone to work together from different areas, so business should start important talks that includes the local communities, indigenous people, scientists, governments, and experts to make smart choices that help nature last and make a big difference. Another aspect is capacity building, knowledge sharing, and technology transfer. Targets 20 and 21 of the GBFs want to make us better at sharing knowledge, passing on technology, and working together in regions. You know, the big goals of the GBF need different areas and regions to work together. We think events like today's conference are great for sharing knowledge and getting people to work together. Government department will also look for chances to host events that help people learn about new environmental topics and improve how they share information. The government has also made effort to share environmental and biodiversity data with groups and the public by creating open database like EBD's Central Environmental Database and AFCD's Hong Kong Biodiversity Information Hub. And we plan to add more to this database in the future. And Patrick's talked about nature-based solutions. Targets 8 and 11 of the GBF advocates adopting nature-based solutions to enhance climate resilience and nature's contribution to people. NBS refer to an approach that uses natural process and ecosystems to address various challenges such as climate change, biodiversity loss, water management, and sustainable development. And this solution leverages the inherent benefits provided by nature, such as carbon sequestration, flood protection, and habitat restoration, to achieve environmental, social, and economic goals in a sustainable manner. The focus on NBS offers business a chance to mitigate climate impacts and enhance biodiversity at the same time. This solution not only benefits the environment, but also brings economic benefits, encouraging innovation, saving money, and building resilience. While our review of overseas examples on NBS shows that many ongoing and completed green projects in Hong Kong already contain NBS elements, as a relatively new concept with varied interpretations, further research is needed to develop assessment criteria suitable for local applications of NBS. Looking ahead in the next phase of BCEF, we will continue to work with relevant partners within and outside the government to support update of guidelines and provide technical support to encourage wider adoption of NBS among different sectors. In Hong Kong, we know it's important to protect nature, and we are focused on getting more business involved through our updated BCEFs. The updated BCEF will focus on integrating biodiversity into business practices, helping them learn new things, make partnerships, and think of new ways to protect nature while running their business in a sustainable manner. When plants and animals disappear, it doesn't just hurt the environment, it also affects business in different areas. Business have to pay attention to how they affect nature, check on their actions, and be open about it. Actually, business are transitioning towards sustainable practices. A shift that has evolved from being a mere trend to a crucial aspect for maintaining resilience in a dynamic world. There is a growing expectation for business to contribute to nature conservation by promoting eco-friendly practices like NBS and adhering to regulations that govern the responsible utilization of natural resources. Moving forward, we are committed to engaging relevant stakeholders, including those from the business sector, during the update and implementation of the next phase of BCEF.
Very good, Simon. Thank you. And Sophia, I'm looking at you. Let's make sure we hear about your very practical example of a nature-based solution during this session, because it's a term that's used quite widely. As Simon would say, to some degree, we have a lot of existing projects that are. It's sort of a particular packaging. I think where it becomes really interesting is where it sort of allows the investment from the private sector to get involved in biodiversity at scale. But before we do that, David, you've been very patient. Thank you. You're not fooling me, you weren't asleep. So perhaps if we could sort of hear from you how you've been involved in sort of discussions about business and biodiversity, and can you, from those discussions, can you share perhaps what sort of challenges you're hearing, but also how people, how companies can think about starting to get involved in this space?
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks. So yeah, I'm with a consultancy firm, and we are talking to many of our clients now about nature and how they can start thinking about their relationships with nature in a more holistic way and incorporating this into their business decisions. And principally, we're working with clients who are looking to adopt TNFD, which we've already heard about from some of the other speakers. And this is a process that AECOM ourselves are undergoing at the moment. We're also in the process of adopting TNFD as a reporting framework. So what's been quite interesting for us to see is that different businesses are using and looking at TNFD in quite different ways and using different perspectives. And I guess this is not surprising to some extent because businesses are working in different fields and different geographies, therefore they have different materialities. But quite interesting nonetheless that they're taking these different perspectives. So for example, a company like AECOM, my own firm, not my firm, but the firm I work for, an infrastructure firm is using TNFD as a tool to help expand the range of issues that are adopted or looked at under impact assessment when we're working on infrastructure projects. Where, for example, a firm like a pharmaceutical firm, for example, would be looking more at biodiversity and water resource dependencies. So although we have these differences between how firms are adopting TNFD, we are seeing as well some commonalities in terms of issues in getting into this field to begin with. And firstly, I think even for a very, very small firm working in a single location, the kind of issues related to nature in terms of all of the risks, impacts, dependencies, and opportunities are huge. And you cannot possibly achieve full disclosure under TNFD in just 1 year. You need to kind of phase it and start looking at some key materialities maybe in the first year to understand what those key issues are, and then develop a roadmap to a full disclosure in the future with some key targets along the way. Secondly, I think it's also important for a lot of businesses to realize that TNFD is not something that we are starting from scratch. A lot of firms already have some biodiversity policy or strategies in place. In a jurisdiction like Hong Kong, where we have very comprehensive environmental legislation, there's often data that's been collected already that can be used as part of your reporting under TNFD. And as well, a lot of firms are already involved in TCFD, or IFRS now. And TNFD was purposefully set up along similar lines to TCFD to enable that transition. So if you're already reporting under those existing mechanisms, you've already probably got quite a lot of the data and the frameworks in place to help you with TNFD. So what we're helping clients with is to look at their existing data collection and reporting processes and then understand what they can reuse under TNFD, and then analyze what gaps they have that we need to fill in terms of collecting more data. Third thing that we're looking at with clients who are beginning to look at TNFD is helping them with the LEAP assessment protocol. So this is an assessment methodology recommended under TNFD to help look at those relationships with nature, standing for locate, evaluate, assess, and prepare. And at the beginning of the TNFD process, most clients are focusing on those first two stages of locating the organization's interface with nature and evaluating the risks and dependencies that they have. So for most businesses, most different sectors and subsectors, there's quite good information available to get you started on identifying key materialities using programs like Encore. But what we're seeing is that there's a bit of a gap is with the locating. In terms of the geographical location of different nature risks and dependencies. Obviously, this is very variable wherever you're working in the world. And if you have a company working in multiple jurisdictions, some of which might be quite data-poor countries, this is a big gap in terms of taking up TNFD. So we've been working with the Sustainable Markets Initiative to develop a nature risk tool that basically brings together about 25 different data sets, global data sets referring to different aspects of nature that allows you to look at risks and dependencies and issues across the globe, at any particular location. So if you couple that type of tool together with Encore, this gives you a very, very firm platform, a foundation from which to start undertaking the LEAP assessment and the TNFD framework disclosures. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Some really good, solid, sound, practical advice there. Patrick, let's building on what David was talking about policies. Can you share? We were speaking the other day, and you were talking a bit about Swire's biodiversity policy. Can you tell us a little bit about how long you've had that, how you came about developing that?
Yeah, sure. I think as part of our Sustainable Development 2030 strategy, biodiversity was has been there for quite some while before we have that TNFD discussion in this couple of years. So that policy actually drives us to integrate biodiversity considerations for the project that we at the very early design stage and up to the whole life cycle, operational, demolition phase to help us to think of the lens from nature and biodiversity, how we can do a better job in terms of the building design and management. So we also have a very detailed biodiversity guidelines. We did it with the support of Hong Kong U, Dr. Billy Howe, to inform us, for example, on our landscape plan, what are the specific concerns about the species selection, what are the native species that we should select, which species are giving us as much ecological value to the local fauna. So we have to start to pick for some of the species that we find having ecological value, but the problem is, we can't find it in the local husbandry. Somehow for some of the trees like the Tou Cham Hang incense tree, we have to start to work with KFBG to actually plant it from a seedling stage for 6 or 7 years. Now we transplant it into our new garden in Taikoo Square and Taikoo Place. So I definitely welcome every one of you. You have a chance to come to Taikoo Place to pay a visit. It's a new 70 square feet green space that's recently launched in Taikoo Place to complete the whole redevelopment project of Taikoo Place. And that, the design and the purpose of that green space, of course, is promoting local urban biodiversity in a very highly urbanized business district. We find that there's something we can do to contribute that. So the green space we aspire to actually connect the existing green space. For example, the Quarry Bay Country Park extensions, and also there are some public parks in Quarry Bay by the seashore. So within Taikoo Place, with that additional 70 square feet green space, we hope to improve the connectivity among these different habitats. So we are also working with Concordia University to try to assess the level of connectivity achievement that we're going to bring from that connection of this additional green space. And also within the landscape design, we are also very fortunate to have our landscape consultant advisory on adopting a sort of naturalistic way of landscape plan and management. So if you come, and it's not very heavily clipped, neat, tidy style, but more on a organic and natural way that we let these plants grow. So when you walk along the path, somehow you will actually touch on the flora and the trees and the branches. But we find that a lot of birds and insects will actually prefer this kind of organic and micro habitat, three-dimensional layer with grass, shrubs, and trees all formed together to a more naturalistic way. So we want to also promote that style of landscape management scheme with the industry. So to create more sort of favorable habitats for these and animals and fauna. So and at the last point is that the selection of plants is also important. So there are over 260 species that we actually introduced in that garden, Taikoo Square, and more than 20% are native species, and like Tou Sam Hung, and some of the species we start from the seedling stage, and we start to see some rarely seen birds in some of the urbanized area. Last time when Simon and your team paid a visit, we saw a orange-headed thrush. Tang Tao Dei Dong, which is more not it's a migratory bird, not commonly seen in urbanized area, but more maybe in the new territories, in the more in the secondary forest. But we see that spending a week there in Taikoo Square. So of course this is just one example, but of course we have to do a lot more to actually assess whether there will be improvement over time of the number of species that we see. So we are working with KFVG to do continuous ecological assessment in the park, and hopefully we can share result next time, and positive result hopefully. And we also want to share the case with the broader industry because that needs us to work together with government, with all the private developers and infrastructure building, etc. to do a little bit more. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you. And I think what's so nice about urban biodiversity projects like that is not just the values that you talked about, but as a tool for mainstreaming biodiversity, because you're exposing people in cityscapes who might not be the kind of people who go hiking and have exposure to nature. You're actually bringing the nature to them. So look forward to seeing more of those kind of projects. Now, those of you, the rest in the room who are playing with your phones, I hope you're all sending questions through. We are starting to get some questions through, so I'm actually... David, you talked about sort of difficulties of data availability in some places for sort of site-based work. So there's a question coming through. This is actually for you, Simon. Is there any plan to publish a public habitat and species map of Hong Kong so that corporates can help sort of analyze their dependence and risks? So this is actually for Simon.
Okay.
Just riffing off something that you said earlier.
Yes, Andy. I just talked about we have Biodiversity Information Hub, which will contain the most comprehensive ecological database for Hong Kong. You will have all the species informations and the distributions in the database. Of course, access to some of the sensitive information will be limited to some users, but not for the general public. And also I said that the EPD has the environmental database, which also contains all the environmental data for Hong Kong, which can be used for reference by developments and other purpose. So we will further develop on that.
Fantastic. So do go and have a look at those two databases, which I know AFCD and EPD have put a lot of effort into. David, please.
Sorry, could I just supplement on the data? We're currently working in other places in Asia where we're not as lucky as we are in Hong Kong, where we have very good data sets available through the work of EPD and AFCD. And we're applying kind of new data collection methods to help speed up and make data collection much more cost effective in those areas, including using AI learning for remote sensing data as well as audiovisual data that we're collecting on the site. And eDNA is becoming a much more effective tool, I think, especially in the past few years, in terms of conducting rapid biodiversity assessment surveys. The cost has come right down. It used to be a bit of a luxury item, but now it's much more affordable. And the databases that you need to actually analyze the data you collect are much more comprehensive and readily available now. So I think there's definitely new technologies coming on stream that are helping us to collect much more comprehensive data more cost effectively.
Fantastic. Now, no, keep your microphone on, please. Not everybody in this room will know what eDNA is.
Oh, sorry.
If you could just explain a little bit and how it's used, because as you say, I mean, you know, the days when a person with a clipboard used to have to go into a forest and record everything, I mean, hopefully that's very difficult to scale up.
Okay, so eDNA, the E just refers to environmental, and DNA is the genetic material that all organisms are carrying along with them. So if you go into any environment and you look at the soil or the water and even the air now, you can collect small fragments of DNA that are shed by all of the plants and animals and fungi and bacteria that are living in this environment. So you can effectively go into a site and collect a number of small samples of soil or water or air and then get a fairly comprehensive database of all of the different organisms that are living in this environment. So we're not at the stage yet where it's going to put all of us ecologists out of a job, but still a useful supplement to give you a snapshot of all of the organisms that are living in an area at any given time. Fantastic.
KFBG will be relieved to hear that. They're not going to put all your ecologists out. Sophia, I promise you the opportunity to share about this amazing sort of idea for forest restoration.
Yeah, sure. So just to add that we are doing eDNA work in KFBG as well on our own side, and especially on the soil. So just for everybody's information, KFBG has been doing very scientific and proactive reforestation in the last 30 years or so. So from our side, you can see from the different vintage of planting and with all the different diversity and experiments. So over the years, now the eDNA research can show that restored forests have much more biodiversity just from the soil sample overall. So just now, Simon mentioned habitat restoration as a nature-based solution. That's also coming up in the in general discussion, and potentially I hope that will be part of the upcoming BSAP as well. So for us, reforestation, if you look at Hong Kong society as a whole, just now David mentioned the challenge for individual companies, how do you quantify and identify and isolate the dependencies and the impact of nature. But if you look at Hong Kong as a whole society, reforestation is just the one nature-based solution that ticks most boxes in terms of nature dependencies and nature impact as the most important mitigating factor. And so we would really like to plant this idea in everybody's mind. So number one, why Hong Kong? Hong Kong is really important. So globally, China probably, China now ranks as the number 2 biodiversity financing priority area because China has a lot of biodiversity and we want to protect it. And Hong Kong, despite our small size, holds almost 1/3 or sometimes over 1/3 of the whole China's biodiversity in the key categories. So why here, why now? Because it's urgent and it's absolutely worth protecting. And reforestation is probably the most effective way for us to contribute to Hong Kong's positive future.
Fantastic, and some obvious benefits for people and biodiversity and climate. A question's come through for you, Patrick. So what can companies do to support Hong Kong's BSAP apart from Target 15?
Many things. I guess the Target 15, I would still say is very important. At the end of the day, business have to evaluate, as part of the risk management process, what are the importance of, biodiversity in nature to your direct operations, and also more importantly to your, supply chain, because that rests on a lot of your, raw materials availability, the stability and the pricing. I guess as a business, first of all, you still have to do the Target 15, but that's not the end, right? Because the result of that will actually help you to identify what are the transition plans if there is a need for your business to shift away the current maybe negative impact from your business operations or to your supply chain to a more positive actions. And that will actually generate a lot of, actually organic, development of your whole business strategy. The speakers have talked a lot about, their eDNA, right? For example, there are new business opportunities there, and there are a lot more, sort of products and services which are, nature positive. And that would actually come from the opportunity with that BSAP plan. I guess that's actually drive a lot of business from different industry to think about your current product and services, what are the interface with nature, and what are the material sort of impact, risk, and also opportunity to shift away from the current, negative impact to positive impact. I guess that is for every business to think about, and in that way, that would naturally also supporting what Simon and Mickey is trying to solicit the whole business community to to move along the same direction to the same goal of achieving the city level BSAP plan. So I guess every business should start to think about that process. It's not just for disclosure's sake, not just for getting a nature barn or something like that. It's actually a matter of reviewing your business strategy to stay relevant, to stay future-proof. I guess that is indeed a key question. If you can answer that, you don't have to do anything else. I mean, that is the existence of the business, basically, to align with the trend.
Terrific. Any other panelists want to sort of comment on this question about? Please, Simon.
Thank you, Andy. Actually, I want to ask Patrick. Patrick's talked about very good examples of the Taikoo Square, employing NBS and biophilic design in the development. I want to ask you, if you do a cost-benefit analysis for the development employing NBS or biophilic design, would it incur extra cost to the development compared to the more traditional type of development? Because I think other than taking a moral ground to protect biodiversity, business also need to look into the cost.
Make a living. Yeah.
So I would like to ask you about that so that you can share with us whether this is worthwhile to do so, because other than money, the benefits the nature-based solution or the biophilic design bring to us.
Yes, thank you, Simon. I'm very glad you asked that question. But actually, I think for our company, integrating ESG is part of our strategy, as I mentioned, and it's part of the DNA of the company. Not just biodiversity, but all sort of sustainability issues like climate resilience, circularity, biodiversity, green buildings. It's also part of the formula what we position ourselves and what we offer to the market. It's the whole sort of sustainability integrated buildings and properties that we present to the communities. And it's also fall on the trend what we see in the market, what our tenants would aspire to have, right? So not just your traditional brick and mortar office, they want to come to work. Now they want a place that is sustainable, energy efficient, climate resilient, and also biophilic and access, very easy access today, so that they can enjoy over lunchtime. Now there are many tenants now during lunchtime or over a long meeting, they want to go into a green space to enjoy the flora and enjoy the flowers, listen to the birds and all that. I feel if you ask me the quantification of the benefit, I think it's something, a research project that I want to put out to have ongoing. But of course the ESG whole sort of green buildings and energy efficiency is very well established. It's a premium, and also it's what driving a lot of not only Swire but a lot of real estate developers here are also investing a lot more in having that provision to our tenants, because that's what the market need. At least the Hong Kong upper office market would need for that. So but also in terms of helping us to address from the risk perspective, it's also, I forgot to mention, is the way the garden that is built in the whole Taikoo Place is actually a climate resilient solutions. Okay, so because when the plan design the Taikoo Place, we want to actually make it more firmly comfortable for the communities. So we did a lot of with a consultant, things like the computational fluid modeling. And with different building orientations, and also we introduced a wind corridor to bring the sea breeze into the Taikoo Place, the heart of the Taikoo Place, and adding to that green space that will actually help us to increase around 27% of firmly comfortable areas within Taikoo Place. So we'll feel cooler if you come to Taikoo Place, if you compare that without that green space. So it's actually a sort of a nature-based solution. We regard it as part of that nature-based solutions to help us to sort of mitigate, with the climate change, extreme weather impacts that we really wish to use these sort of natural way of helping us to address this risk. So if you ask me, there are obviously very benefits, and the quantification is putting one side is still very worthwhile to do, and invest in that. So our management is very really supportive on that concept. Yeah. Thank you.
Hopefully there's some answers there, but as you say, it would be very interesting, not now, but perhaps once it's got a few years under its belt, to actually look at the sort of tangible and intangible benefits. So my prompting has resulted in a slew of other questions, and I apologise, we're not going to be able to raise all of these. But there's an interesting one here, which is primarily for you, Simon. So the question is sort of talking about the whole government approach and mainstreaming within government specifically. The question is sort of what can AFCD do to get other government departments to do even more on biodiversity? I'm going to reframe that question, because I think that was sort of the expectation of the last BSAP, but that is sort of an unrealistically heavy weight to put on AFCD, an Environment Bureau, to expect you to do all the heavy lifting with the other government departments and bureaus. So I'm going to open the question up and make it a bit wider and say, what can IFCD and others do to help mainstreaming biodiversity within government?
Actually, I can tell you that it's not easy to mainstream biodiversity in all the sectors. In our first BSAP, I can say that we are pretty successful in mainstreaming biodiversity in the government, in various government departments. As you can see, we use BSAP as a tool to set the directions and the strategies for all the relevant parties, including the government departments, to contribute to biodiversity conservation. And actually, many of the government departments, like the Works Department, they've been doing very well in adopting biodiversity in their programs. Like what I said, like the DSD has been revitalizing the drainage channels using ecologically friendly design, and they revitalize all the drainage channels to improve what convert the traditional drainage channels into some ecologically friendly ones that can promote the biodiversity in the territories. So for the updated BEC, our aim is to engage wider communities to take forward the biodiversity conservations together with us, what we call the whole of government and the whole of society approach. Business sector is one of our focus. I can say that for the first BEC, we have already engaged the business sectors in taking forward the BEC strategy and actions. But we would like to have much deeper and wider engagement of the business in the updated BEC. This is also in line with the COP16 decisions. And as you can see, since COP15, the participation of business in biodiversity conservation is gaining a much wider recognition.
Terrific, thank you. And I would like to echo a point that you made at the beginning here, which was to thank BEC for actually putting on this engagement. And I think BEC, you certainly have a role to play to help, or there's a role that you could very usefully play to actually involve other government entities in conversations like this, because they're the conversations that we need to have. All right, we can take one other quick burning question from the floor. Otherwise, we need to wrap. All right, let's leave time for our next panel sessions. Thank you very much for everybody on the panel, and thank you so much to the people who sent in questions.
Thanks to our moderator and all the panelists for the insightful discussion. Now we know more about the government's strategic vision of biodiversity in Hong Kong, as well as the role that the business can take. So please come forward for a group photo.
Where do you want to?
Just at the center of the stage. Yeah. Just stand closer. Yeah. Thank you, all of you. Please take a seat. And with Susan Ho, please remain on stage.